Welcome to Interfaith Conversations today. I'm Matthew McKnight, your host. Today we have a special episode where I will sit down and talk with staff from a really unique and amazing school. It's called the Hartford International University for Religion and Peace. And I'm actually here in Hartford, Connecticut today, taking a look. You'll see behind me a bird, and that's their particular image. What is so neat, I think, about the design of it is that it's supposed to represent an ascending dove. And the dove is lifting itself higher, and it's covered with a lot of different colors to represent the diversity of faith and belief that people bring to their studies here. So let's go ahead and take a look and sit down with our staff. Well, Dr. Grafton, welcome to Interfaith Conversations. Thanks for joining with us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
I reached out to Hartford International University, and they brought a really acclaimed person onto the podcast here with Dr. David Grafton. And so what I'd like to do is to start is kind of give your bio, Dr. Grafton, and then we can kind of hop into talking a little bit more about the university. So the Reverend Dr. Grafton is the professor of Islamic Studies and Christian-Muslim Relations on the faculty there at HIU. He runs the Duncan Macdonald Center for the Study of Islam and Christian-Muslim Relations. And he holds a PhD in Islamic Studies from the University of Birmingham, England. And Dr. Grafton's academic interests focus on the history of Christian-Muslim relationships, Lutheranism and Islam, Christian theological perspectives on Islam, and the history of Christianity in the Middle East, among other things such as the American Christian perspectives of religion and society in the Middle East. Dr. Grafton often speaks at community groups, congregations, mosques, Islamic centers, travels to do that overseas even, and he's an ordained pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and has served in several Lutheran congregations throughout the world. He is also an author of numerous academic articles, book chapters, and books in and of themselves, and he joins us today to talk more about HIU. So Dr. Grafton, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Dr. Grafton, so could you tell us a little bit more about what Harvard International University is and how it began?
Yeah, sure. So HIU, as we call it, has been known by a number of different names. It was originally founded in 1834 as the Theological Institute of Connecticut. But for most of its history, it was called Hartford Seminary, and actually is known around the world in many Muslim-majority countries as Hartford Seminary. And there's a number of reasons for that. It originally was founded by congregational ministers who broke away from their relationships with Yale University because they felt that Yale University was becoming too liberal, and they wanted to found their own Calvinist institute. And so they did that, which is interesting because we've had a long journey from formal Calvinism to where we are now at HIU, but that's a part of our story. Initially, pastors of the Connecticut Association created this seminary to train white men for ministry in the congregational churches of New England. That began a relationship ultimately with the United Church of Christ. And so the seminary became one of the seminaries of the United Church of Christ. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, it distanced itself, not because there was any kind of theological or social debate going on, but simply because of what was happening in the broader landscape of theological education in Protestant denominations in the 70s. It became its own entity, free from any kind of control from the UCC, and then became freestanding, a freestanding seminary. Interestingly, I mentioned that it started out as a seminary for white Christian Protestant men, And the trajectory has been to move from that very exclusive perspective to a very inclusive perspective. Hartford was the first place to begin offering full-time study for women in the 1890s. It was the first place that women could get a degree in full-time study. We're the first Christian seminary to hire a full-time Muslim faculty member in the 1990s, and then that has broadened out. We have several Muslim faculty members and a Jewish faculty member. We also hired in 1980, I believe, a sister, Catholic sister. So throughout the years, Hartford has just broadened itself and seen itself this trajectory from conservative Calvinism to an inclusive space, still predominantly Christian, but moving to more interreligious. And that's where the name change to Hartford International University for Religion and Peace comes in. In 2021, we changed our name, added a number of different degree programs, which I can talk about, and see ourselves really as a graduate school of interreligious studies.
Wow. So the biggest thread I see through all of that is this evolution, this shift between where the institution wants to kind of go, and it's kind of pushing kind of in this forward trajectory there. What I thought was really interesting is how you said a Christian seminary brought on a Muslim scholar to be on the faculty. I find that fascinating. Could you talk a little bit more about, like, how did HIU go from a strictly Protestant seminary to an institution that created you guys created the first Muslim chaplaincy program in the United States by
Right.
2001, right?
Yeah, it was the first accredited Muslim chaplaincy program in the country. Yeah. So the trajectory here is that, and it's very ironic, one of the early foci of Hartford Seminary was world missions. And it was known as a leading Christian seminary in world missions. It was very much involved in the 1910 World Edinburgh Conference that gathered thousands of predominantly white Christian leaders to talk about mission in the world. And the result of that was the creation of the Kennedy School of Missions here at Hartford in 1914, I believe. So this small little seminary started drawing all kinds of people to study mission. One of the professors here who came in 1894 was Duncan Macdonald, and he was of Scottish origin, and he was an Islamicist. He was hired here to come to teach Hebrew, first and foremost, and then Arabic as a cognate language of a Semitic language. And then he began teaching Islamic studies. And his view was that if this place was going to be training Christian missionaries to go out, some of them into Muslim majority countries, they better know about Islam, as he said, from within. That is, as Muslims understood it, not as Christians understood it. So it's very much a forward-thinking position for him in the 1890s. And we've named our center the Duncan Macdonald Center, which was founded in 1973 after him, after this vision of a Christian engagement with Muslims as they understand it. That led ultimately to a number of faculty members, Christian faculty members, who were teaching about Islam, teaching Christian-Muslim dialogue, and ultimately came to the right conclusion that really the best way to learn about Islam is to learn from Muslim faculty members. And so in the 1990s, the seminary hired Ibrahim Abu Rabia, who was the first Muslim at any seminary at a full-time position. From there, we hired a number of other Muslim faculty members, Ingrid Matson, who was at one point the first female head of the Islamic Society of North America and a scholar in her own right. And we've gone on to hire a number of different faculty members. Mahmoud Ayub, a well-known Lebanese Shia scholar who's come here. So with these Muslim faculty members, we were able to attract Muslim students who came for a wide variety of reasons. And that really created a unique ethos where Christian and Muslim faculty members and Christian and Muslim students were engaging directly together over a variety of topics. Now, there were other different religious traditions at Hartford as well, but this is my particular area, and this is in the Duncan Macdonald Center. This is what our interest is particularly.
Well, that's fascinating. One reason why I believe the name was changed to Hartford International University was this global scope. And so you do have international students that come from all over, including parts of Africa and even in particular Indonesia. Could you share kind of the relationship that the school has kind of nourished kind of overseas to help not only provide more of a either ecumenical or interfaith dialogue, peace building kind of approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the name change in 2021 to Hartford International University was in many ways to both explicitly name our international focus, but also to provide a label that was more resonant around the world as a university as opposed to a seminary or a Christian seminary, for example. But with the hiring of these Muslim faculty members, particularly Ibrahim Abu Rabia and Mahmoud Ayub, they all had networks around the world of Muslims and Muslim colleagues that they knew and communities. And so when they went and traveled, they would recruit students to come. One of our former presidents, Heidi Hatzel, was very influential in getting us traveling to Indonesia and also to Iran, and created a number of networks, especially in Indonesia, where Indonesians know us quite well. And right now we have a program that's been supported by the Grand Imam of the Istiqlal Mosque in Jakarta, which is the largest mosque in Indonesia, where he's sending students for a short course for 3 months at a time to come and be with us and to engage in intercultural and Islamic studies. And it's been a fascinating experience. So those of us who are Christian have our own networks. And for example, myself, I have a whole network of colleagues that are involved in Christian-Muslim relations in the Middle East and in North Africa and East Africa and West Africa. And so, we utilize those networks we have. And as I mentioned earlier, a colleague of mine and I, Lucinda Mosher, we were in northern Nigeria this summer at a center that was set up by one of our graduates. So we were taking, we're so fortunate to have these gifts that we've been given by our students who go on and do good work, and we can see the results of that.
That's a good example of what you reap, you sow, and bringing in all these different, by way of analogy, different seeds into the university. It's let branches grow into whole new places that weren't available before. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I have on that piece then is just to tease it out a little bit more. So from the seminary side of the house, where it was this focus of teaching either missionary work or other type of Christian focused service, to now kind of a shift towards this idea of interfaith dialogue. How does that kind of play out now in the university, from where it came from its roots to kind of how it plays out now?
Yeah. So let me answer that in two ways. So the remnant of this history of a Christian seminary still exists in a very small program called the Cooperative MDiv Pathway. And we don't offer an MDiv. We used to, but we don't offer an MDiv, the Master of Divinity, which is still the standard for most Christian ministers and denominations. But we have a pathway whereby Christian students can come and study with us for 2 years and then transfer to a traditional seminary where they can complete their degree, get their MDiv, and then be credentialed in their own denomination, UCC, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, whatever. And the students who come through that pathway do so because they recognize the value of being involved from the get-go in an interreligious setting where they're doing theological studies with people of other religious traditions, because that's the reality of life in America and in the world. And so they want that experience before they go on and complete their degree, doing particular requirements wherever they are. And our partners at these Christian seminaries, the feedback we get is that our students that come there, are they're so intuitive. Like, they ask questions that other students who go through the traditional programs don't ask. They have this kind of interfaith antenna, and intercultural antenna from the get-go. So that's I'm very proud of that. It's an important gift that we can give to the Christian church in North America. But in terms of the other programs, so we have a number of different programs. A Master of Arts in Peace Building, which is a 1-year program that brings people from around the world. We have a Master of Arts in Interreligious Studies, which is our standard and basic master's program. We have a Master of Arts in Chaplaincy, which provides skills for chaplains. And then we have a PhD in Interreligious Studies. So regardless of what program you're in, you're going to be studying with people of different religious traditions. You still have requirements to fulfill, but you do so with those other students in your class. In the Master of Arts in Interreligious Studies, we have a number of required courses that are team taught, and they are team taught by faculty members of different religious traditions. So my colleague and I, Hossein Kamali, who is an American of Iranian descent and a Shia, we teach a course called Faiths as Formal Realities. And we look at God and Scripture, and the two of us provide a model of conversation about how Christianity and Islam and all of its diversity approaches these topics. And our students are required to engage in that. And I think that's the really unique thing about HIU. That is that most theological schools are of one particular religious tradition or another. You can go to a Lutheran seminary or an Episcopalian seminary. You can go to rabbinical college, or you can go to a Shia madrasa. You might have students of different traditions within that. They may be, but not the majority of them, right? And your curriculum is still based on that particular tradition. The other spectrum is at universities where you have religious studies programs that are specifically talking about religion, the supposed objective view of religion. We take the view that you need to bring yourself, your spirituality, your theological perspective into the conversation, not only amongst your own kin, but with other people. And I have found that to be the best way to actually strengthen one's own theological convictions, because you have people of other traditions asking questions of you that you may have never had before. And it really creates, and the atmosphere itself, the sociological atmosphere that we have in class creates this dialogue, this interreligious dialogue.
That's fascinating, because it's like what you're saying is the school is focused on really creating what we already have in society, which is religious pluralism, but in a way that brings people together, that allows people to have conversations across these different streams of a religious perspective in a manner that it can inform your own perspective to be more well-rounded, to understand where the other sides are coming from, and in a sense, almost create your own constructive view of how religious pluralism can play out in society in a positive manner. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a positive manner. I think that's what's really important. One of the biggest things that when our students leave here, they become comfortable in difference. They accept it. They don't get anxious about it. And that's what often I find when I go out and speak with churches. People are anxious because of there are Muslims in the community and they don't know what to say. They don't know how to defend Christianity, or they may not have the right answer, and they're worried about it. And our whole educational process is to recognize that you live in diversity and to lean into that. I always tell pastors, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Having your convictions and your beliefs is very important, but it's how you do that politely, respectfully, honorably with people who differ in those theological perspectives. And you can learn a great deal about what it means to be human in this, and also more about what you believe.
I love that. I mean, it's really an experiment of what we hope everyone would do, which is that if we live in a pluralistic society or in a place where there are other religions, that we don't just give in to religious tropes or stereotypes, but by engaging with the other, you not only learn their worldview, but you also kind of learn more about yourself. And that's what's
Yeah,
so neat, what you say about students that go to other seminaries, and that they can bring now what they've seen about their own worldview in ways that others hadn't been exposed to, and
yeah,
how unique and valuable that can be when they get out
yeah,
there. That's
right.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned is that among students, former Christian students, and who are now pastors, is that quite often pastors and priests are afraid to engage in interreligious dialogue because they don't feel like they're qualified. They don't feel like they know enough, or they don't feel like they're ready, and they're worried about what that might mean within their congregation. And so, what we try to do here is to equip people with the recognition that you never will know enough, and what you might learn about a particular, let's say, African American Muslim community that might be in town is not the same thing with an immigrant community of Yemeni origin, right? Completely different issues that come to play. And of course, of, let's say, Hindu community that is of South Asian descent that has a lot of converts to their community. So all this religious pluralism is a fact, and getting people comfortable with that and having the antenna is really, really important.
This reminds me of a story from myself in college and why this is so important to have these type of experiences. I had a friend who went to school with me in grad school that was from Jordan, and he was Muslim. And I remember having all sorts of conversations in our grad bay all the time, him sharing his view of what he saw in America about Christianity and how it played out, and how that didn't always fit with his worldview from Islam. And how when he talked to me about his worldview, it brought to me really important things. For example, the whole idea of a redeemer is so fundamentally different. It's
Mhm.
ontologically different, really,
Mhm.
between Christians and Muslims, in the sense of Christians' whole worldview is based around an atonement and a redemption
Mhm.
focus. But in Islam, the whole focus is on Allah, and there is no need for a redeemer. God is everything to you. And so it made me get outside my own little, I call it my fishbowl, get outside my own
Mhm.
little fishbowl and realize there's a whole thing out here I haven't even been swimming in before, and
Mhm.
completely fundamentally shifted how I approached
Yeah.
conversations with people from the Islamic community. And he similarly learned things the opposite way, in mutually beneficial ways, I think, because of that type of interaction.
Yeah, I think those direct interactions are key. I mean, that is the issue, is meeting with people who aren't quote unquote representatives of a monolithic religious system, but are believers in their own right, in their own way, and they have their own stories to tell, and those are important to engage directly in.
Yeah. So moving on to a kind of the question about students coming to HIU, maybe some people have been hearing this and they're sold this is exactly what they've been looking for. Why should students consider HIU as a place for study, and how can they go about applying, and what should they be thinking about in that
Oh,
space?
thank you for that. We're always glad to have more publicity and more students. Yeah. So obviously our website is the best place to go. There you'll find images of all of our former students and faculty. And of course, the admissions office is very good about responding to questions and queries. And we always like when people contact faculty and say, "Hey, I'm interested in what you do there. Tell me more about yourself." Like these kinds of things. So getting the word out is really important.
I think that would be great. And you follow a similar academic year as other schools in the United States, right?
Yeah,
From
yeah, we do. We'll be starting our academic year after Labor Day. We have a fall semester and then a short January interim of about 2 or 3 weeks, and then a spring semester, and then a June summer term. And we accept people all throughout the year. One doesn't have to start in the fall. We've had a number of students start in January for life circumstances. So we're always available for that. The two programs that only take admissions in the fall are the Master of Arts in Peace Building, because it's a cohort model and they come in the summer and finish in June. And the PhD program, we also have a cohort model. And I did neglect to say, we also have a Doctor of Ministry program that begins in the fall, and that is cohort based too. And the Doctor of Ministry is particularly for religious leaders, whether they are pastors, priests, rabbis, imams, chaplains. They have a cohort of professionals, religious professionals.
Gotcha. Oh, that's great
Yeah,
to know about that one too.
yeah, yeah.
So, in terms of students that want to come to the program in person, they can do those type of programs. But for those who are interested in being able to attend HIU but may not be able to in person, what are some of the online opportunities? I know those are opening up more and more.
Yeah, and we can thank COVID for that. In a weird kind of way, but we've been doing online education for a long time, actually long before COVID. But our Master of Arts in Interreligious Studies and our Master of Arts in Chaplaincy can be done fully online. And that's done a number of ways, either through synchronous online classes like Zoom or asynchronous classes, the more traditional, older model of online education. The peace building program, as I said, is in residence. That's required. And our Doctor of Ministry program, students come in for short retreats or short terms. They don't have to be here in residence. They just come for maybe a week at a time for a class. And the PhD program, the first year is a full-time required program. International students need to be on campus for the full year, but domestic students will come for 2 weeks in the fall and 2 weeks in the spring. And then after that, it can be done either in residence or remotely. So everything's very, very flexible, as it needs to be in this day and age.
Oh, that's great to know. There are options for people that
Yeah.
may not get into Hartford very often, but can still make that work. What about, I heard there's also a graduate certificate style online type of program. Could you talk about that piece for those who may not jump into a full program, but still want to learn about the great things that HIU can teach them?
Yeah, the graduate certificate in interreligious studies is 4 courses. So you would take, you could do that either 2 courses a semester and be done a year, or you can take 1 course each semester for over 2 years. We often find that it's a great way to start. Someone's maybe a second career, they've been out of school for a while, and they're not sure if graduate education or theological education is, for them. Can they do it? Do they want to do it? So they'll start off with a course or two and do the certificate and then decide, actually the degree program is, what I'm really interested in. I should say that for the chaplaincy program in particular, this is really crucial right now, especially after COVID. Interest in chaplaincy programs has grown dramatically. And so it's a skill-based degree program. And we train people for hospital chaplaincy, military chaplaincy, prison ministry or prison chaplaincy, university chaplaincy. So there's a wide variety of different areas in which people can go to. And we have a good number of military chaplains who are in our program now. They're already deployed or they're on base, but they need to get credentialed. And so they've come back to us to get their master's degree or their education.
Awesome. And that could be, it could be a Christian chaplain, it could be a Muslim chaplain.
Yeah.
Any of those type of things. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And actually, Muslim chaplains are so needed in the United States military because there's a growing number of Muslim citizens who become soldiers, sign up. And there's very few Muslim chaplains. And what this means is because the U.S. military is required to provide spiritual care for all of their soldiers, that means that if a Muslim is in a unit where let's say there's a Catholic priest, well, of course, the Catholic priest may not be able to minister to the Muslim or provide all the services that they need, but they're required to make sure that that soldier is cared for spiritually. And so quite often they'll reach out and find a Muslim imam or another elder who can help provide spiritual care for that soldier. So that's why Muslim chaplains are so needed in the military right now. And last spring, we graduated 5 just all together as a cohort. And it was amazing, just amazing.
Oh, that's amazing that we can fill that need, that you can fill that
Yeah,
need. That's
absolutely.
fantastic. So one group before we move on that I wanted to make sure that we also got a little bit of sound time for is we haven't talked a lot about the Jewish side of what is offered there at HIU. What can people coming in say for rabbinical studies or moving on to kind of help in that space for Jewish minded students?
Yeah, historically, our Jewish students, the population has been quite small, but it's grown over the last couple of years. And that's thanks to our hiring a Jewish studies professor who is now our dean now. Dina Grant is professor of Jewish studies. And she's done an amazing job in, again, like I said earlier, when you hire faculty members of a particular religious tradition, you find students who are interested in studying with them. And so we've had a number of Jewish students come to study with us. Now, like the Christian students who need to go on and get their Master of Divinity, Jewish students who want to be in the rabbinate have to go to a rabbinical school. And so that's extra time. We have had a couple of students go through our peace building program who have gone on to get gone on to rabbinical school and become rabbis.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so there is kind of a trajectory still for
There
students
is.
from the
Yeah.
Jewish community. Well, we've talked about so many great things at HIU and kind of how you go about that. I think kind of as I transition into discussing a little bit about what's been in your wheelhouse for a long time, Christian-Muslim relations, I want to ask kind of a bigger question as we get into that, which is why study religion or peace? Do they really have any impact in the world today? I mean, you look at the news, you look at what's happening in different countries. You see what's happening in the Middle East right now, Sudan, Ukraine. There are some very serious challenges in this world, and so why study religion, and what worth is peace?
Yeah. Well, I'm biased, of course, because I'm a Lutheran minister and born and raised in the Lutheran tradition. But I do believe that we are, we're religious beings. It's a part of what it means to be a human being is not only to be emotional and to need to be in relationship with other people or the world or the environment, but also God or, the spirit or the higher power, whatever it is that people see in their worldview. We are spiritual beings. And so we can't deny that. And when you get people together, anytime you get people together, there you will always create a community around something. And the communities around spirituality are religions, religious communities, and they're like any other human community. They're there for a particular purpose, hopefully to help, but often they're fraught. In my tradition, we call it sin, right? We are faulty human beings that are in need of guidance and saving. So that goes without saying. But throughout the world, people often talk about religion being the problem, where
Mm.
quite often it actually can be the part of the solution. And, many of our wars, most of, not, well, I don't know percentage, but a good number of them are ideologically driven, right? They're nationalist driven, they're ethnically driven, they can be religiously driven. There's no question about it. But there's a lot that goes into those different conflagrations, right? And often religion can be a way to parcel through those difficulties. And I've heard this, especially from military chaplains, when they were deployed in Afghanistan, where they actually became kind of the face of the unit to speak to the local community. Why? Because they were a religious person. They were a clergy, and they were respected as that, right? So clergy or religious people have particular standing in their communities, and that does carry over into other communities. And I saw this so frequently living abroad, living in Egypt, and how important it is for religious leaders to set the tone, set the pace for their communities, and they do. But also, I think, as religious people, we live our lives and we make our own moral, ethical, and spiritual choices on a daily basis. We may not think about it, but we do. And I think one of the things that I like to help people do is to think about those decisions explicitly, like that their faith, their religion does have particular daily interaction.
I appreciate your response to that because, I was playing a little bit of devil's advocate there in that, I personally have a similar view in that religion and peace both are things worth striving for and utilizing to make the world a better place. There might be conflicts and situations where religion has been heightened or its connection to some type of violence or political conflict situations occur. But in many cases, it's the fabric that brings people even tighter and closer
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make it through those same
Mm-hmm.
times. And even for those who I would say, those who some would call quote unquote the nuns
Yeah.
of belief, those who don't feel like they belong to any religious denomination, still have a belief in
Mm-hmm.
something. Either it's in science, either it's in themselves, either it's in values or human progress. Those are still human values that I think people can bring to the table and have constructive conversations, even with those who might consider themselves more religious.
Yeah.
And it's really through those that we all benefit if we're willing to have those type of conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the way that we approach the topic and the other person, right? It's our how we engage, and by honoring that person, seeing that person is valued in and of themselves. One of the best experiences I had interreligiously as a leader was when I was teaching at a Lutheran seminary in Philadelphia, and I was asked by the local bishop to be on the Greater Philadelphia Interfaith Council. And it was made up of about, at least 30 different religious communities. And it was structured in such a way that it really worked. The focus was on Philadelphia issues, local Philadelphia issues, and how to address local Philadelphia issues. So the council addressed policing, immigration, gun violence, and everyone had different perspectives on this. They didn't all agree politically on the answers to these things, but they were all of the religious communities were affected of these issues one way or another. And so they began to work together on finding solutions locally. And it worked. It is possible, and religious communities can do great things.
I love those type of stories when we can come together and make a difference. So, kind of switching gears, then, you've spent decades now studying the idea of Christian Muslim relations yourself. What got you interested in that topic?
Yeah, I God only knows. And that's the truth. So, yeah, I grew up in the Detroit area, downriver Detroit, actually. And I attended a church in Dearborn, Michigan. Was a long family roots go back to that church, building the church actually. And of course, my younger days, my teenage years there, and I went away to college, and first week, I was signed up as a history major, and I went into my advisor, Dr. Howard Wilson, who became a mentor to me, and he said, "Okay, you're a history major. What do you want to study?" I said, "Well, I'm interested in the Middle East." And he said, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." And I'm like, "What do you mean it makes sense?" He said, "Well, you grew up in Dearborn, right? Your church is in Dearborn." I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Well, that's the largest Arabic speaking community in the United States right now. Didn't you know that?" I'm like, "No, I didn't know that." Right. So that, like, I was shocked. Now, of course, looking back, I've replayed this over and over again. And, I knew we talked about East Dearborn. We talked about a variety of racial slurs or ethnic slurs or religious slurs, but I didn't really know anything about that as a teenager. And it was when I left that I finally realized, oh my gosh. And it prompted me to go on this journey to begin, why didn't I know about this? Well, there's a good number of reasons why I didn't know about this: racism, nationalism, all kinds of things. And so it cracked me open, and I've been on a journey ever since to, everywhere I go, I keep saying, God keeps putting Muslims in my path. Everywhere I go, I meet Muslims, and they become my friends, my colleagues. They challenge me. It's my vocation now, and I can't get away from it.
Wow, it's like being led right into that, and I love
Yeah,
that story. The irony of growing
absolutely.
up in Dearborn, Michigan, and then after the fact realizing
Yeah,
how close you really were to that culture and that
yeah,
that that perspective.
yeah. And I go back, visit family all the time, and we go to East Dearborn. We get great food, and we go for important holidays. And there's some Arabic Christian communities there. We'll go to those churches, festivals. So now it's a part of my worldview.
Wow, that's fantastic. So what led you then to HIU as a professor?
Yeah. So again, it's a long story, but I went to a Lutheran seminary, and as a part of that, we have to do an internship in a congregation for a year, training as an intern. And I was fortunate enough to have an international site, and that was in Cairo, Egypt. So I did my internship in an international congregation in Cairo, Egypt. And of course, that was life changing. And I can talk more about that if we have time. But I came back and finished my Master of Divinity. And given the system that we have, I was assigned out to New Jersey and got a call in New Jersey. And that was in 1994, shortly after the first World Trade Center bombing. And so I recognized very quickly that there was a good bit of Islamophobia in Christian communities in northern New Jersey. So started working with another pastor to bring people into mosques to engage, learn more about Islam. And after a couple of years of that, I thought, I really maybe I want to get more serious about this. And so I had heard about Hartford Seminary through a colleague who had done his master's here. And I drove up for a summer week intensive on Islam in America. And that was it. I left that after a week, and I'm like, okay, I need to go on. So I finished, I applied to graduate school in England, went on to get my PhD.
Wow. Well, it was a stepping stone as part
It
of your
was a
journey.
stepping stone. So it was very ironic when I got a call from a colleague here. I was teaching in Philadelphia at the Lutheran Seminary, and I'm very happy there. And they said, "Could you come up and interview here?" And my good friend and dean, Karen Sebastian, said, "Oh, David, you must go. This is for you. This is made for you." So I ended up back here at Hartford, actually, after that first graduate intensive back in 1996, actually.
Wow. Yeah. So you've really seen it grow, and you've been able to be a part of that experience as HIU's kind of grown into this a globally recognized institution for interreligious focus. Would you say then, you kind of alluded to one of these before, but is there some moments in your career studying Christian Muslim relations that you were surprised by what you learned, or what were some kind of moments that inspired you as you've kind of gone through that? I mean, we could have a whole conversation just on that question.
Yeah, there's all kinds of moments. I think I go back, the first mosque I went to visit was when I was in undergraduate, and Howard Wilson said, "You need to go visit a mosque. This is what you need to do." So I visited a storefront mosque in downtown Columbus, Ohio, spring of 1986. That was the first place I went.
Wow.
And I
And
was
you
just,
found one.
yeah, and I just like after that, I was like, wow, this is a whole new world, right? And so, as I said, God just keeps putting these opportunities in my way. But for me, the most life changing experience was when I was in Egypt, serving at St. Andrew's United Church, which is an international congregation. I served as the intern, and then ultimately went back there and served as the senior pastor there. And the great thing about that place is that there's a significant refugee ministry of refugees from the Horn of Africa. Cairo is home to the United Nations Commissioner on Refugees. And so many refugees from the Horn of Africa, Central Africa, travel to Cairo to seek asylum and UN protection. Because of that, a number of different agencies started up ministries to help and support the refugees who were there. They weren't able to access education. They had difficulty financially, also emotionally. And so St. Andrews was one of the places that provided educational opportunities, a skill programs to help develop skills for jobs. And the most unique thing about St. Andrews was that it hired intentionally people of diverse religious traditions and ethnic communities so that they would work together. So we were the only Christian ministry in Egypt that hired Muslims on purpose. We also hired, at that time, back in the early 90s or the 90s, Marxists from Ethiopia. But also, we had Catholic Sudanese, South Sudanese, and Presbyterian Sudanese who didn't get along and often fought. And we required them to work together. And so it was an amazing experience to see these refugees who were administrators and teachers and accountants, and they're well qualified people who were, for no reason of their own, suddenly a refugee in a foreign land, and all had to figure out how to live. And it was the most humbling experience to learn about what it meant to be a human being, and to care for other human beings, and to be cared for by these human beings, many of whom were refugees.
What an incredible experience. I mean, it's important for people, I think, in the US, especially to hear, but anyone in the world, to hear that there are places where people come together to work across differences and use their faith to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and that's a fantastic example. I really appreciate you sharing that one.
Yeah. One other story that's important is one of our longest, at least when I was there, and she was still teaching when I left, was Miriam. She was from Somalia, and she was a school teacher. She was Mohagabat. She was veiled, right? And she taught kids from all walks of life, different religious traditions, different ethnic communities, and some were Muslim, some were Christian. When those kids got resettled, if they were lucky enough to get resettled, many of them to Australia or Canada, they would call her up and say, "Teacher Miriam, I want you to know we made it. We're in Canada or we're in Australia, and we want to thank you for teaching us." These are Christian kids, so thankful for their Muslim teacher, um, in Cairo, who gave them an opportunity. That's incredible. That's incredible.
I love that story. It makes me also think about the fact that there are times when us as human beings get thrust into situations where we do need to work together, kind of like that scenario in Cairo. And we don't always do it, but when you do, amazing results can come from that. But also, it can still happen even when it's not a pull factor or like a being forced into it, but also the intentions that we have. If we are willing to just go out into our communities wherever we live and be intentional about
Hmm.
reaching out to someone who's Muslim or Hindu or Baha'i or whatever have you, just to build that you can still do that. You don't need these, you know, hardcore things to push you into that space. Great things can happen when you just take the time to go and do it and
Yeah.
act yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, unfortunately that's one of the important lessons we learned after 9/11. And that was when we were teaching our students or theology students that whenever they moved to a new location, a new call, that they needed to start visiting not only their members, but they needed to look up who were the leaders, the religious leaders in their community. Who was the rabbi? Who was the imam? Who was the sheikh? They needed to know these things to start relationships with them. God forbid if something terrible happened in the community, they would already know who to call. But more importantly, when they wanted to do something good, when there were food insecurity issues, right? Or there were domestic abuse issues in the community, they already knew each other, that they could work together to figure out solutions for their community. So absolutely, it's all about the disposition that you have when you enter into a space and what possibilities you see interreligiously.
And that, I mean, that makes me think of what happened with lots of communities with the war in Gaza. Communities that already had connections before the uh, the war began. There was big rifts that happened, right, between Jewish and Muslim, but sometimes Christian Muslim groups because of those rifts. But if those relationships were already there, there was so much more of a likelihood that people would stay and work through those hard relationships and difficult moments. But if you hadn't already made those relationships, it's kind of hard to show up. Not saying you can't. It's always good to just start
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Don't just give up. Don't say,
right.
oh, there's no point. Um, but working through that issue together only help make some groups stronger because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and the war in Gaza has been really, really difficult on interreligious associations around the country. It's been very, very difficult. And many of them, uh, a good number of them, just stopped meeting over this issue. Um, you just got to keep plugging through. You have to recognize the humanity in the partner that you're trying to work with. And it's a very divisive issue, but the leadership has to set the tone for being open to hear from other people. You've got to hear what they're saying. That's critically important.
That's really important. So, I guess to kind of wrap up, I have two questions that are kind of related. But for viewers watching the channel and the podcast, there's a lot of misinformation today that Christians can't get along with Muslims, Muslims can't get along with Christians. There's no way you can resolve that. It's rooted in history and the Crusades and all those kind of tropey type of questions. But what would you say are resources that people can think of or things that people can do? I guess two buckets there: resources of what can help people, and also what kind of action oriented things can people do to get past that? Just everyday people.
Yeah, those who say that you can't get anywhere and Christians and Muslims are just at loggerheads, and there will never be goodwill between them. It's just not true. It's just plain not true. Those are people who have their own ideological backgrounds. Most denominations have, at least denominations I'm familiar with in the mainline tradition, have resources on their websites, ecumenical and interreligious resources that you can turn to. There are other good interreligious resources and websites that people can turn to. But primarily, the best way and the most effective way to engage in Christian Muslim relations positively is you simply have to find the local community in your area or someone of another religious tradition in your area and reach out to them and say, let's figure this out. Let's meet. And I guarantee it that once the ball gets rolling, it's like going downhill. Here's an example of that. I was in a congregation. I was a member in a congregation because I was teaching full time. And the women's group came to me and said, we'd like to go visit a mosque. Can you help us do that? I said, absolutely, but I'm not going to do it. You're going to reach out to some of the local important women in that community, and I'll help you do that. And then you take it from there. And I found out that the women from the congregation went to visit the women in the mosque. They had such a great time, such a great experience. They invited those women from the mosque to the church, right? And they came and they did a reciprocal visit. And they started up relationships, individual relationships. It's organic. And that's the best way to do it, is you just have to get into other people's spaces, if you will, or figure out how to get invited into other people's spaces, start up these relationships one-on-one. That's the best way, because it breaks open your whole preconceptions of people as representatives of a religious system.
No, that's really important advice, is the action of getting out there and doing it. I anytime I have moved to a new space and found a local mosque or community beyond my own, it's always been so meaningful, welcoming, and it just makes a difference. It just opens that box. It really, the best thing to do is go out there and talk to the people who live
Mm-hmm.
the belief
Mm-hmm.
the beliefs that you're wanting to get to understand better, and to get to know people from that community. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
Yeah, the first rule of interreligious engagement is not to talk about people, but to let them talk to you. Let them define themselves. Don't speak for them. I can talk about Islam. I can talk about Christian Muslim relations. I can talk about interreligious engagement, but don't take it from me, right? You have to talk with individual Muslims. What do they believe? What's their story? Where do they come from? That's the important thing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Dr. Grafton, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about Hartford International University and what it means to live together in a positive manner in a religiously plural world, and how we can make religious pluralism a positive reality for all.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to be here and talk with you.